Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I am Ayya Soma, and it's good to see you online once again. Hello to Rick, Nancy, Upasika Tara, and Kumu, as well as all the other friends who I see as a little dot on the little number dot on the screen, but that haven't checked in yet. So we can start this evening with a little bit of meditation, just a short meditation, and then we will proceed with the sutta that we were studying, that we started studying this morning. Hello, Victor. Welcome. Good to see you, friend. And yeah, so we can get into a comfortable seated position. Making sure that our back is upright. We can take a few deep breaths. Relaxing the entire body from the top of the head to the tip of the toes. Releasing any tightness. Any pain. Anything uncomfortable. Any tension that we find in the body. Then we can slowly lift our attention to the breath, holding it there, perhaps anchoring it to the tip of the nose. Or perhaps keeping a wider angle. And capturing the breath throughout the body. Either way, you can put the effort to watch deeply and with curiosity the process of breathing. Is the breath short? Is the breath long? Is it subtle? Is it coarse? There is no right or wrong answer. It just is what it is. Our duty is not to make it long. Our duty is not to make it short. Our duty is not to make it subtle. Our duty is not to make it coarse. Our only duty is to know in every moment if the breath is short, if the breath is long, if the breath is subtle, if the breath is coarse. Seeing it clearly as we are experiencing it. Not wanting for the breath to be any different than what it actually is. If the mind is restless, dull, craving, hating, or doubtful, it doesn't matter. We don't need to make it any different than what it is. Our only duty is to observe the breath, whatever the conditions are. We just bring our attention back to the breath over and over again. And the more we hold our mind anchored to the breath, the more the mind becomes still. And the more the mind becomes still, the more the mind becomes peaceful. And the more the mind becomes peaceful, the more the mind becomes happy. So we can recollect how this happiness is always accessible to us if only we put in place the appropriate conditions. So we can wish for ourselves to always be happy, always be healthy, always be peaceful, always be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. Truly meaning it. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I be free from suffering. May I be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May I attain unconditional happiness for the benefit of myself and others. And we can extend this wish to all the beings in the room or online meditating with us together tonight. Or just sharing the space with us. Humans or non-humans. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be safe. May they be free from suffering. May they be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May they attain unconditional happiness for the benefit of themselves and others. And we can really nourish and grow our metta, loving kindness, and extend it to all sentient beings, without exception. In this town, in this state, in this country, in other countries, on land, in water, in air, in this world and in other worlds, in this universe and in other universes, in this realm of existence and in other realms of existences. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May all beings attain unconditional happiness. May all beings attain blissful, supreme Nibbana. For the benefit of themselves and others. May all beings have happy minds. And we can treasure this happy mind full of loving kindness for a few moments. And then slowly come out of meditation practice. And you can open your eyes. You can take a few moments to stretch your body if you need to. And welcome to all the other friends who have joined us in the meanwhile. Good to see you all. Hello to Anita and Visaka and Sacham. Welcome, friends. All right, so before we continue with the sutta, we can pay homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham tamham sangham namasami. All right, welcome, friends. So this morning we started reading from the Sabbasava Sutta, so all the Taints, Majjhima Nikaya 2. And we covered the sort of introductory part of the sutta. So we gave a bit of an overview of what the Buddha is going to, go through the rest of the sutta. And so the sutta has been subdivided for us to go through it in a series of talks. So this is the second one, and then we'll have another talk tomorrow morning and tomorrow evening, as well as Friday morning. That will be the final talk. So tonight we will be covering the taints to be abandoned by seeing. So the sutta proceeds. I will be reading from Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. What taints, bhikkhus, should be abandoned by seeing? Here, bhikkhus, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, does not understand what things are fit for attention and what things are unfit for attention. Since that is so, he attends to those things unfit for attention, and he does not attend to those things fit for attention. So, abandoned by seeing. So seeing, the Pali for seeing, what is translated as seeing here is dasana, which means, of course, seeing, sight, and is used here also as a sort of kind of reference to sammaditi, so to right view. So it's not just, seeing, a bird flying or seeing a painting on the wall or seeing, our surroundings, but actually seeing rightly. So seeing rightly means seeing in a way that leads towards liberation. And the untaught ordinary person, asuttava patujana, I remember when I first started reading the suttas, I was encountering, the Asuttava Patujana, so the untaught ordinary person, or actually, as there's another translation from Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi that calls the Asuttava Patujana the uninstructed worldling. That actually is my favorite translation, possibly, for Asuttava Patujana. And when I would first encounter the uninstructed worldling at the beginning of, say, the statement of the Buddha, I was expecting for myself not to be the uninstructed worldling, but to actually be, either the noble one or, at least someone little, better than than just, a random commoner. But instead, over and over again, there was the description of myself. So of all the different actions, how I had gone, about my life since I have memory of. And it was actually both shocking and also a relief. This is what actually got me so interested in the suttas, so interested in the teachings of the Buddha, is the fact that the Buddha actually highlights how, unskillful we are when we go about in the world, and also gives us these corrections for our conduct. So it doesn't only say, what you've been doing so far is terrible, but also how do you correct it? And so we see in this suttas, the Buddha starts by describing how this sort of conduct comes. So who is this untaught ordinary person? Well, the untaught ordinary person is one who has no regard for noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, and also who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma. So no regard for noble ones is actually directly connected with unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma. Because if you have no regard for someone, then of course you cannot be very skilled in what they're teaching, right? So if I don't have any regard for physicists, it will be very unlikely that I will study physics, because it's not something that is in my sort of value system, something that I actually care about. And you see that also this sort of, there's a strong kind of connection between the two. And if we think about traditional Asian Buddhism, how it has been practiced and brought to us, the teachings of the Buddha for the past 2,500 years, we see how there is a strong connection between monastics and lay people. And because historically monastics, well, you know, the monastic order, contrarily to, well, I believe every single monastic order, every single actually order, except for the ones of the Jains maybe, was in Buddhism, the monastic order has been created by the Buddha. In the other orders, I come from Italy, so I'm familiar with the Catholic orders. Well, Jesus did not create them, but they were followers of Jesus who then created different monastic orders and created also just clergy, so priests and, you know, the Vatican and all the different elements of organized religion. But in our lovely disorganized religion, as I like to call it, called Buddhism, actually the Buddha created the Sangha. The Buddha created this connection, also the Dhamma. He didn't create the Dhamma, he discovered the Dhamma, and he also set it up with the Vinaya. So the teachings of the Buddha are comprised of Dhamma Vinaya, and they actually, Dhamma Vinaya together creates the conditions for both monastics and lay people to be in contact with one another and in support with one another. And so historically, for the past 2,500 years, it's the monastic order that has kept these teachings intact and brought them from generation to generation. And when the monastics actually keep the precepts, if not the entire Patimokkha, so the entire, you know, monastic precepts, at least, you know, the most salient ones, or the ones that are, you know, important for this interaction, then also lay people can come in touch by supporting the monastic Sangha with the Dhamma. And this has been going on for the past 2,500 years. And through the suttas, we see also how the Buddha encourages over and over again the practices of supporting the Sangha, and for the Sangha to actually share and support the lay people, so share the teachings. And so this relationship is mutually beneficial and ultimately supportive for the realization of awakening. It's important here to highlight true men is actually sappurisa. That can also be translated as, Ajahn Jeff has, as a person of integrity, that I prefer actually to the true men, because true men sounds a little bit weird. Who are these true men? But a person of integrity, on the other hand, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. In the Sappurisa Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 113, the Buddha explains what is this person of integrity, and it's a person who, fundamentally a disciple of the Buddha, who practices the teachings and does not fall prey to praise, honor, and gain, and has no conceit of superiority. So someone really with a good morality. And of course, then, you know, if we want to associate with such people and then learn from them and make progress towards the path. So that's also why the Buddha tells us that Kalyanamitta is the entire path. Not in this sutta, but in other suttas, the Buddha is very clear about that. He says, Ananda, he corrects Ananda when Ananda says it's only half of the path. The Buddha says, no, it's actually the entire path. It's important. It's fundamental to have people ahead of us in the path who can point us in the right direction. And of course, the most supreme Kalyanamitta is the Buddha. And right after him, it's the enlightened beings, so the Mahasangha. But we see also how, you know, it's quite rare actually to be, you know, someone who is not. It's actually rare to find someone who is not an untaught, ordinary person. So, for example, tonight, you know, we we have a few people that are tuning in, but it's not, that many that you can find at other types of live streams with different contents that are not the Dhamma. But even, you might say, well, yeah, of course, Ayya Soma, she's not really that popular. But even when you see Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's lessons or Ajahn Brahm's lessons, even Dalai Lama, I think the Dalai Lama has significantly less followers, even on Instagram these days. It's very popular Instagram, right? Than someone like Kim Kardashian. So that's why also, untaught ordinary person is quite appropriate for the connotation of Asuttava Patujana, because it's more common. It's very difficult to find people who are interested in these teachings to begin with, let alone people who then want to actually associate with people who are practicing these teachings and realizing them for themselves, right? So we can take a moment actually to rejoice in all our good karmic conditions right now, all of us who are tuned in together and that have these incredible conditions of mind to be interested in the teachings of awakening. This is so rare. The human life is rare, but actually having a human life and having access to the Dhamma and having the conditions of being interested in listening to the Dhamma and then wanting to practice the Dhamma are incredibly, incredibly rare, and are the fruit of incredibly good deeds that we have done in the past. So we can congratulate ourselves, we can pat ourselves on the shoulder and go, okay, well done, well done. Can recollect our own goodness, and we can see how recollecting our own goodness is already like delighting the mind. And it's great because this gives us energy to move forward in this path that can be a little bit challenging, because even though we have these like noble aspirations, our tendencies, our natural tendencies are still the ones to behave as and think as an untaught ordinary person. So it requires a lot of effort to actually really point our minds over and over to, what is wholesome, what leads towards awakening. And, if we do just like the uninstructed worldling over and over again to, go and pay attention to things that are not worth paying attention to, well, at least now we know that what we're doing is unwholesome. So we're already like, a step further along the path than we were before having access to the teachings of the Buddha. By the way, what is translated as does not understand what things are fit for attention, it's basically manasikara, which means fundamentally what ought to be done with the mind. So it's something active. It's not just something that, passes around and maybe we catch it or not. It's actually, we need to know what needs to be done with this mind and then use the mind in a particular purpose. Because when we don't know, then we just follow our instincts, which we, already covered this morning, that our instincts are really not quite directed well. And they actually lead us towards cultivating the asavas, cultivating all those taints that lead to suffering. So anyway, the sutta continues. So what are the things unfit for attention that he attends to? They are things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire arises in him, and the arisen taint of sensual desire increases. The unarisen taint of being arises in him, and the arisen taint of being increases. The unarisen taint of ignorance arises in him, and the arisen taint of ignorance increases. These are the things unfit for attention that he attends to. And what are the things fit for attention that he does not attend to? They are things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire does not arise in him, and the arisen taint of sensual desire is abandoned. The unarisen taint of being does not arise in him, and the arisen taint of being is abandoned. The unarisen taint of ignorance does not arise in him, and the arisen taint of ignorance is abandoned. These are the things fit for attention that he does not attend to. By attending to things unfit for attention, and by not attending to things fit for attention, both unarisen taints arise in him, and arisen taints increase. It's a bit of a tongue twister. But the Buddha, once again, does this out of compassion to be very thorough and, really analyzing it step by step. So even though it's repetitive, the repetition is actually done for our own sake, for our own well-being. And in essence, basically, what this passage says is that we've got it all backwards. So fundamentally, we pay attention to what we shouldn't, and we don't pay attention to what we should. And this means that things that weren't presently there all of a sudden become present, and things that are present then are fueled. And these are, of course, unwholesome. He's talking about the 3 different types of taints. So the taint of sensual desire, we covered this morning, the taint of sensual desire, the taint of, I think here the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi translated it as the taint of being, which can also be translated as, craving for state of existence, fundamentally. So it's bhava. So being, existence, or becoming, those are all ways to translate it. And then, of course, the asava of avidya, of ignorance, which is always the toughest one. So how does this happen? It's very important that, we actively nourish these taints when we are uninstructed worldlings. Because once again, not knowing, as we said earlier, not knowing actually what needs to be done, we kind of go hit or miss. And unfortunately, we miss more than we hit. And so we actively nourish these taints that then lead to suffering. So for example, when it comes to kama, so the taint of sensual desire, an example could be paying attention, for example, to the sign of the beautiful. So we see, I'm always taking this cup, so it's not really pretty, but we'll pretend that it's pretty. And actually, perhaps the texture is quite pretty. So then we can see, if I pay attention to the mark of the beautiful, then I can, start increasing and expanding sensual desire and craving for this cup. And perhaps from one cup, I want a collection of cups. And then, I'm like keeping on generating all this sort of excitement and longing and just all along a craving for this cup. And then this cup is not, satisfying anymore, but I've like created this, tendency of accumulating stuff, of wanting more and more. So then I leave the cup and I'm like, oh, but look at this like lovely, cushion, meditation cushion. I want more. It's like nice and soft. And actually, perhaps if it was, of a different fabric, we can it's never ending, right? We can just keep on developing it. And in terms of, states of existence and ignorance, we can talk about it a little bit more as we go through this sutta, because the Buddha, I think, tackles it better later. Speaking of the top of the cup, got to take a few sips. So the Buddha proceeds. This is how he attends unwisely. Was I in the past? Was I not in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? Having been what? What did I become in the past? Shall I be in the future? Shall I not be in the future? What shall I be in the future? How shall I be in the future? Having been what shall I become in the future? Or else he's inwardly perplexed about the present thus. Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this being come from? Where will it go? This is possibly like my favorite passage of the entire Sabbasava Sutta. When I first read this several years ago now, I remember I felt like I went to a really skilled therapist who, like in a matter of seconds, kind of just managed to pinpoint the craziness of my mind with such ease and with such, synthesis. And and this is once again a yoniso manasikara in action, in past, present, and future. And we've just done it if we reflect on our lives, because none of we're all in the same sort of sinking ship unless we have a certain stage of awakening or not. We've all done this over and over again since we were born, and we keep falling back to it, right? So we see, for example, craving states of existence right here, and developing ignorance too. Who was I in the past? What am I going to be in the future? And what about now? Who am I? Got a lot of things to ponder here. And the sutta proceeds. When he attends unwisely in this way, one of 6 views arises in him. The view self exists for me arises in him as true and established. Or the view no self exists for me arises in him as true and established. Or the view I perceive self with self arises in him as true and established. Or the view I perceive not self with self arises in him as true and established. Or the view I perceive self with not self arises in him as true and established. Or else he has some such view as this. It is this self of mine that speaks and feels and experiences here and there the result of good and bad actions. But this self of mine is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and it will endure as long as eternity. This speculative view, bhikkhus, is called the thicket of views, the wilderness of views, the contortion of views, the vacillation of views, the fetter of views. Fettered by the fetter of views, the untaught ordinary person is not freed from birth, aging, and death, from sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. He's not freed from suffering, I say. So we see here the development of of ignorance fundamentally. So all these views that arise and feel like as true, and as established, as Venerable Bhikkhu Body skillfully puts words this here, and we see the appearance of the self, so atta soul, so something solid, permanent. But then we can think, wait, the second, or there are, some talks of anatta here too. So he says, no self exists for me. So wait, I thought that there was no self in Buddhism. And also, we can have, different perceptions of I perceive not self with self, or I perceive self with not self. This is all very amusing. But fundamentally, especially no self exists for me sounds like it could be right view, right? Well, actually, there's a big problem there. In all of this, there is always the I. There is always someone there that even when we think is not there, we cleverly think is not there. We intellectually think it's not there. We're like, oh yeah, I got this non-self thing, Yeah. pretty sure not there is no self. I can experience it, right? And the problem is the I, because fundamentally we haven't uprooted the actual experience of permanence, the actual experience of self, the actual experience of suffering. So this is very much connected actually to Gita's question this morning, if I remember correctly, where Gita was asking precisely that, whether, if this practice, if we, just focused on the 3 characteristics, wouldn't that be like a faster way than actually having to go through all this, these instructions of the Sabasava Sutta? And fundamentally, yeah, the answer is yes, but the reality is that there are all these obstructions in order for us to practice that way. And because we fundamentally think that there is a being. And when we talk in that way, there is a self or there is no self. As the Buddha skillfully says in the Kachanagotta Sutta that we recite every morning in here at Empty Cloud Monastery, very beautiful, beautiful sutta. If you can paraphrase correctly by memory, the Buddha says that, we our mind veers always between existence and non-existence, when we are uninstructed worldlings. But instead, the Buddha teaches the Dhamma by the middle. And what does that mean, teaching the Dhamma by the middle? Well, in this case, for example, of the self is dependently arisen. So it's not that there is nothing. And it's not that there is something. But rather, there is, we can call a self that is dependently arisen, that is in constant change. And that's why we can't define it as who we are, as something that is solid, that is permanent. Right? So if we think of, if I think of Ayya Soma, when Ayya Soma in what we conventionally say this lifetime, when she was like 4 years old, and now, well, 2 entirely different beings, right? But there's still a sense that that was me when I was 4 years old, and this is now me who's about to turn 40. Right? So there's that sense of permanence, and there's that sense of continuity, and there's that sense of solidity. But as we really practice in the way that the Buddha tells us to practice, then we can start eroding this sense of self, this sense of permanence, this sense of soul, I think, is actually a better word, at least for me, to talk about it. So it's not that there is no self, there is no soul, I think, is like more, the right word for atta or for anatta in this case. So something permanent that then continues from life to life, but rather like, 4-year-old Ayya Soma, which by the way had another entirely different name than Ayya Soma, was dependently arisen. So there were different causes and conditions that created the result of 4-year-old Ayya Soma. And now there are different causes and conditions that create, these 5 aggregates that we call Ayya Soma, who's about to turn 40. And yeah, it's also interesting how the Buddha also talks about it is the self of mind that speaks and feels and experiences here and there the result of good and bad actions, which is fundamentally kamma, good kamma and bad kamma. But once again, here the problem is not So the Buddha is not denouncing karma. So the Buddha is not saying, oh, it's wrong view to actually think that there is such thing as karma. But what he's saying is that it's wrong view to actually consider this self of mine, that this belongs to me. This is who I am. This is me. Right? That is the problem. But seeing cause and consequence, on the other hand, is extremely wholesome. Seeing these are conditions that lead to good results, and these are conditions that lead to, or actions that lead to bad results. That is extremely wholesome. This is the work that we need to do. But when we are, so stuck in these views, it's so difficult to snap out of them, because we think we have also an experiential feeling of it, which is the instinctive experiential feeling of it. It's the experiential is the experience tainted by avidya, which is the most difficult one for me. Oh, there is a darker screen. 1 second. Let me turn another light on. Sorry for the lack of technological expertise at Empty Cloud Monastery. Give me 1 second. Does this work better? I'm not quite sure why it does not work. So we're having our lovely, amusing problems with technology. So the rest of the community is on retreat. That's why you're having a special with Ayya Soma only. And so Ayya Soma forgot to turn on the main light, and then the good, the sort of natural light started fading away as we reached 8:30 p.m. So apologies for that. I was covering up the screen so I don't see my face, but then I saw your comments. Anyway. So getting back to the train of thought will be a little bit difficult, but let me see. So we were talking about the speculative view, thicket of views, the wilderness of views, right? So once we start thinking in that way, guided by our usual ignorance, then it's, very difficult to get out of that contortion. That's why the Buddha uses all these beautiful metaphors. Just imagine getting stuck in a forest, in a thicket, in the wilderness, not knowing where, kind of like a maze too, perhaps, would be a good sort of analogy. And being stuck in the middle of it and not knowing any way out. And perhaps actually with the maze going around in circles over and over again, which then creates that sense that we're going somewhere, but in reality we're not going anywhere. If we're not actually going further away from the exit, we're actually getting even more stuck in the sort of in the thicket. And so we're fettered by the fetter of views. And we are not freed from birth, aging, and death, from sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, not freed from suffering, which is the work that ultimately we need to do. So the fetter is samyojana. And of course, we all know that actually in order to attain full awakening, we have 10 fetters that we need to get rid of, the 5 lower fetters and the 5 higher fetters. And so, of course, what have we spoken about in these past few minutes? All about the fetter of personality view, so Sakaya Ditti. Yeah. So the big avidya. And then, of course, we were talking about earlier, sensual desire, ill will and doubt, of course, and then wrong grasp of precepts. These are the 5 lower fetters, and then the 5 higher fetters. So the desire, for example, to be reborn in a form or in a form state, or the desire to be reborn in a formless state. Those are all we can see connected to the asava of bhava that we were talking about before. Then there is also conceit that we need to get rid of. What we can call restlessness, and ultimately our frenemy, ignorance. Frenemy because we keep on pursuing it. So it's not like we perceive it almost as a friend, but in reality, it's our biggest enemy. Anyway, the sutta continues. Bhikkhus, a well-taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, understands what things are fit for attention and what things are unfit for attention. Since that is so, he does not attend to those things unfit for attention, and he attends to those things fit for attention. What are the things unfit for attention that he does not attend to? There are things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire arises in him, and so forth, and the arisen taint of ignorance increases. These are the things unfit for attention that he does not attend to. And what are the things fit for attention that he attends to? There are things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire does not arise in him, all the way to the arisen taint of ignorance is abandoned. These are the things fit for attention that he attends to. So, in other words, the work of a well-taught noble disciple is the opposite of the Sutta Vapatujana. So the noble disciple, once again, is someone special, not ordinary, quite the opposite. And first and foremost, the noble disciple has right view. And based on that, then the noble disciple can practice all the rest of the path, right? All the rest of the Noble Eightfold Path. And so the asavas, so the taints, what is translated as taints, both don't arise and are abandoned. And they're not increased, in any shape or form. They are actually removed. They are brought to destruction. And the sutta continues. By not attending to things unfit for attention, and by attending to things fit for attention, unarisen taints do not arise in him, and arisen taints are abandoned. He attends wisely. This is suffering. He attends wisely. This is the origin of suffering. He attends wisely. This is cessation of suffering. He attends wisely. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. When he attends wisely in this way, 3 fetters are abandoned in him: personality view, doubt, and adherence to rules and observances. These are called the taints that should be abandoned by seeing. And we see that by working with the taints in this way, we remove the 3 lower fetters and we get stream entry. This is in essence how this passage ends. But it's also such a beautiful, such a beautiful instruction that instead of getting lost in our past, future, or present state of existence, trying to constantly figure out things, we think that, our way of thinking is smart, but actually it just leads us towards suffering. Instead, the Buddha tells us, yes, come back always to the teachings of the Four Noble Truths. Examine this suffering that you're creating, for yourself. What is the cause of the suffering? Is there an end to suffering? Yes, there is, he says. Look for the end of suffering and practice the way out of suffering in order to see this end of suffering and work towards it. So it's incredibly inspiring on so many levels. And on top of that, we can see that the more we train ourselves in this way, the more we actually can see results very quickly, or relatively quickly anyway. I would say at the very beginning, as soon as we start practicing earnestly in the path, actually we can see a lot of progress. At least that was my experience. Then it kind of starts slowing down because we get closer and closer to the, the thicket of of all the things that we cannot let go. But at the very beginning, I mean, if we are very enthusiastic about the path, then we can actually make quite a good deal of progress real fast. And that scrapes away most of the doubt, if not the entire doubt, actually. The doubt that impedes us from the attainment of stream entry. So we have full faith in the Buddha, full faith in the Dhamma, full faith in the Sangha, because it could not be otherwise. It becomes this, just like a map that we're given when we are young, and we see that we start using the map and we start seeing how pretty reliable this map is, and it brings us wherever it says it's going to bring us to. In the same way, even if we haven't been in like certain places in the map, we trust that those places are there, right? I haven't been to Russia, but I'm pretty confident that Russia is where it's at, where it says on the map. And if I follow those instructions, I can reach Russia. So in the same way, we have that full confidence in these teachings, because we've seen that whatever we were able to do, following the instructions of the Buddha, then we were able to find what he said he was going to, what we were going to find, right? Or attain. And that brings so much happiness in the mind. First of all, it gives us an experiential understanding that this is possible, that the end of suffering is possible. And then it also gives us confidence that we can do it. And no matter how hard this is, we just keep on pushing and working and, and making progress along the path. All right, so I think that perhaps this is all for tonight, and then we can keep on exploring the rest of the sutta tomorrow morning. But if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the live chat. So welcome to all the other friends who have joined us in the meanwhile. And Kumu asks, Ayya, when the Buddha said thinking about past, present, and future, is it thinking about last birth, this birth, and the next birth? Or the past, present, and future, and this current birth? Or all of these? All of these, I would say. And, we can look at our mind. So fundamentally, it's believing that, we were a being in the past. So how many times also, if we talk about rebirth, it's very easy to fantasize about who we were in the past, right? And sometimes I can't catch myself, doing that as well. Like, oh, maybe I was a Japanese monk, practicing the Zen teachings and That's why, I have an affinity for this. Or perhaps I'm like, oh, maybe actually I was recently in my past life, I was, in Sri Lanka because I actually love everything about Sri Lanka, and I naturally, have an affinity towards its culture and everything. So like a lot of papancha, right, in the mind. That is it true? Is it beneficial? Yeah, of course it's true, because we've been pretty much everything in the past. So yes, I've been we've all been monks in Japan. We've all been, in Sri Lanka, living in Sri Lanka, people in Sri Lanka. Maybe that is our current state of existence right now in this lifetime. Maybe we're not. Maybe in the past. It doesn't really matter what we were. But it's more that kind of thinking, actually, whether it's in the past or in the future, who am I going to become, where I'm going to go, like, oh, should I go back to Italy, or should I move to Sri Lanka, or should I do this, or should I do that? But who am I actually? What am I talking about? Like, is this body, all this kind of thinking, like, should I lose weight, or should I add weight, or should I be doing this or be doing that? Like, it's strengthening that sense of self. And of course, then strengthening that sense of self leads to suffering. So whether it's this birth or previous births, it's all the same. It's fundamentally thinking that there is a being and reinforcing that sense of self. And let me see. And Kumo also asks, Sakaya Ditti, this is I am, this is myself. How do they relate with Mana, one of the higher fetters? Are they the same or different? So that is actually a very good question, and a little bit technical. So I'm perhaps not the best person to ask this question to. If Bhante Sudazo weren't on retreat, I would pass it on to him. But I would say that my understanding is that Sakaya Ditti, so the first sort of fetter that we let go of when we enter the path, so when we attain stream entry, is the sort of crass, the coarse part of this sense of self. And then, but there's still a sort of latent, for lack of better words, idea that that there is something there is something to it, right? And then it, with full arhatship, then it disappears. Then it's then it disintegrates. It falls away entirely. And the practice, in fact, to remove Sakaya Ditti is to start fully understanding for ourselves that this is not me, this is not mine, this is not who I am. So we do it with all the aggregates. We can start looking at them in that way. And we can start reflecting on the fact that if they were who we are, if they belong to us, as we think, as we assume they do, perhaps not intellectually, but experientially, then actually we could, shift them as we wanted instantly, right? So if we feel anxious, if actually the feeling of anxiety, the emotion of anxiety belongs to us, so then we could change it in 1 second. We could go, okay, well, right now I'm not going to be anxious anymore. Then it would stop. But it doesn't really work that way, right? Because it's dependently arisen. So what we are experiencing when we're experiencing anxiety, for example, is the result of our actions. And those actions have been done in the past. So we can't control the consequences, but we can control the causes, as I always like to quote Venerable Dreame. And this understanding then is basically creates these conditions of disintegrating that sense of self and that sense of ownership. So I hope that answered your question. And Nancy asks, who or what or how is karma governed concerning rebirth into animal, human, deva, realm, or hell? Well, for example, who is actually exactly what we were talking about earlier. So thinking, the Buddha would say that question doesn't really apply, right? Because the question implies that there is a being there, that is someone. that does, that there is that self. But rather, once again, the Buddha talks about cause and consequences. So fundamentally, how is karma governed? You can say, how is the law of gravity governed? So it's just a law. This is how things are. So the Buddha is not that he controls karma. It's not that he, made it up, or it wasn't even revealed to him. What the Buddha did was he discovered the Dhamma. And he actually says that whether, a Buddha comes to this world and discovers the Dhamma or not, the Dhamma still exists. So the laws still apply. It's kind of like whether or not Einstein discovered the theory of relativity or not, the theory of relativity still applies. So it's a law that then creates, if you put these conditions in place, then there's a natural consequence to that. So if those actions are in place, then there is a rebirth into an animal or a human or a deva realm or hell. No different than if, if I take this cup and I throw it, then it's going to break, right? So there's an action that creates a consequence, and we understand it. But there was a time in this world that actually, those things weren't that intuitive because it hadn't been explained. So it was a surprise, right? So it's kind of like our experience of the world as uninstructed worldlings is fundamentally that the world is flat. And the Buddha comes and says, well, actually the world is round. And we're like, but no, I'm pretty sure that the world is flat. That is my experience of the world. And it's actually kind of true, that's the experience of the world, but it's not a correct experience of the world because the world is not flat. So that's the same, it's the same thing, For example, we have the experience of YOLO because that's all we see. So you only live once. But in reality, we live all of multiple lives without discoverable beginning. We've been going and doing this over and over again for countless and countless and countless of lifetimes without beginning nor end. And the only way to end this endless cycle of birth and death is by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, by practicing the teachings of the Buddha. So I hope that answered your question. And Rick says, I used to be content buying just what I needed. Good. The pandemic brought to light an unskillful urgency to hoard food and supplies when they became scarce. How do we free ourselves from this desperation? Aww. Sending you much metta, first of all. And be patient with yourself and send yourself some loving kindness. I mean, it's been a hard year. It's extreme conditions. So of course, then our defilements will more likely than not take over ourselves and perhaps lead us to do unskillful actions. But hoarding food and supplies during a pandemic, in the large scheme of things, is not like the most unwholesome thing. Now, if you're hoarding food and supplies and your neighbor next to you has no food and supplies and you don't give them anything, you don't share them with them, then that's unskillful. That is not helpful. But so being content with what one has, of course, is a very good thing, and absolutely needs to, it's fundamental for cultivating the practice. And cultivating needs rather than wants is much better and much skillful. But sometimes we can get a little bit carried away, and it's understandable. So what we can do is practice giving, letting go of these things. If you've hoarded food and supplies, well, look around and see who needs them. And share with, with what you have available. All right, so I hope that is helpful, Rick. And hello to Cha, who's saying hello. Oh, and Anita says, sending you metta, Rick. Oh, very sweet. Yeah, we all send you metta. Yeah, that's why, as monastics, we have it very easy because we can't hoard anything. We can't purchase. We have no way, no means to actually get what we want. So that's why, we practice. We take these precepts. It's easier than to practice. And Gita says, Ayya, Venerable, I guess Tenzin Palmo maybe, has taught one to train, transform, and transcend the mind. She's incredible. Yes, Tenzin Palmo is a very incredible practitioner. She spent, I think, 12 years or so in a cave practicing by herself. So very inspiring bhikkhuni. All right, so I think that's all for this evening. That was the last question. So unless something pops up last minute, maybe we can end it this way, and we'll meet again tomorrow morning to go through this beautiful sutta. And we can end with 3 sadhus. I'll make sure tomorrow to have better lighting than this evening. And we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well, and happy, and peaceful.